Okay, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to our coaching women and girls masterclass. I'm very happy to be joined here this evening by three local coaches. So on the call, we've got Hannah Bowen, who is a PGA golf professional and coach. We've got Keith Pritchard, coach of West Swansea Hawks. And we've got Georgina Wren, who is a coach at Cardiff Met. Very warm welcome to you all. I'd just like to start by inviting you all just to introduce yourselves, kind of give everybody a little bit of background about what you do, and we'll go on from there. So Hannah, if we can start with you, please.
I'm Hannah Bowen. I am a PGA Advanced Professional Golfer, and I have been now for 11 years. Anyone who doesn't know what it's like to be a professional golfer and coach, I did a degree in golf with Birmingham University, which meant that I had to do 3 years of all the different components of golf. Completely different, I think, to other kind of coaches, but very cool. And I am an inclusive coach. So I spend most of my time teaching blind, deaf, and amputees to make golf more accessible for all. I've been very fortunate that I've also broken barriers down in internationally, and I've worked in Saudi Arabia, getting more females into the game, as well as introducing it into rehabilitation centres to help with anyone who's got a disability. So that's a little bit of my background. I did used to play on the LET Access, WPGA, and JR Series events. I'm not to say that I wouldn't go back to seniors tour eventually, but at the moment, at this particular moment, I'm currently retired. But I started playing golf and started playing golf as because I love the game and wanted to become a professional player. However, life changes and I ended up becoming a professional coach and mid player at the moment. So yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you. And what you've just described there sounds really rewarding. The people you work with must be really rewarding. So, thank you for that. Fantastic. If I can turn next to you, Keith, please.
Keith Pritchard, currently a coach of West Swansea Hawks ladies. I suppose for me it was a bit of a strange sort of entry into coaching. Really, I suppose for me, I got involved in girls and women's rugby at the inception of the Hub program back in about 2016, I think it was, purely because my daughter wanted to play. And as most parents that sit on the sideline, we all think we know best, don't we? And give our opinion. Before you know it, you've got a whistle in your mouth and you're pointing and shouting in directions. So that was really my sort of entry into it, maybe 10 years ago, I suppose. Following a playing career, I guess, and enjoying the sport. You have girls as children, and you think, right, so that must be the end of rugby. But the Hub program was an absolute gift to Welsh rugby, and saw lots of players come through. And now, sort of seeing my daughter all the way through, I now coach within the ladies setup, a very successful ladies setup. We've recently been promoted into the championship, and super proud of what they're all achieving, and just glad to be part of it, really.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, familiar story there with parents, as you say, getting involved. You see a lot of kind of husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends getting involved for that very reason. So yeah, thank you. And then last but by no means least, Georgina, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, so I'm Georgina Wren. My normal day job is I'm a lecturer in psychology at Cardiff University, and I'm really focused from a work perspective on women's health generally. And then from sort of coaching point of view, I used to previously be a rower, so nothing related to what I do now, but I used to coach rowing as well as being a rower myself. And then kind of just decided to change the sport would be for me. And then got into rugby. So I've been coaching for a total across both sports for just over 10 years. And I currently coach at Cardiff University ladies rugby across 3 different teams. And then I also coach across at Club Rugby Cymru Caerdydd for the Hyfforddi, so the under 14 girls. And I guess I kind of became interested in coaching, from my own perspective of knowing sort of what I felt was good coaching and what I felt was coaching that maybe wasn't benefiting the teams I was part of. But I was just really interested in sort of women's sport, particularly. I've always been a fan of women's sport across, anything from athletics to, anything that I can think of to basketball. I've always been interested. So I was really interested in sort of what that would look like from a coaching perspective. And then through my own work at Cardiff, I've developed sort of a series of workshops that I deliver to clubs across Wales that talk about women's health, anything from pelvic health, breast health, menstrual health. And I deliver those to, again, not just rugby, across sort of all sorts of different clubs. And I've seen a huge interest in that from players or people involved in the sport, and even people who feel that they knew their bodies really well and knew a lot about being a woman in sport. Just the uptake and the interest has been immense. So I kind of, from that, just expanded my worldview, I guess, of what people experience in sport and things like that. I'm just really glad to see sort of women's and girls sport being discussed in this sort of opportunity and platform. So yeah, happy to discuss a range of things today, I guess.
Brilliant, thank you. If we stay with you then, Georgina, just for a moment longer, what does success look like to you, both as a coach and in the people that you're coaching? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so I say probably the first thing for me is like building a culture. So we're huge on culture at the university, and it's different because we get a huge amount of turnover. Every 3 years people are leaving, and you've got new students coming in as 18-year-olds, and leaving as these, whether you've seen the experience of university. So I think a huge thing is building a culture. And from that, a lot of it is sort of players buying into what you're selling. And that's not everyone buying in. You can't please everyone at all times. But for me, a really successful environment looks like people really buying into what we're selling, in a metaphorical sense. Sometimes that's engagement. I feel, we've had a successful session or a successful season or a successful month when players are really engaged, and that looks different for different players. In our club, some players are great and they want to ask questions and oh gosh, that makes so much sense, and they're really vocal. But some players, just the fact that they've come to every session that week, for me, is huge success. They've got out the house. That's massive. And although results are great, and obviously, I would love all my teams to win every week, that's not always the case. And, we were speaking before this about, 100-0 losses. Like, to me, there's success to be taken from that, and different opportunities there. And yeah, I think it's massively about enjoyment and, a sense of psychological safety, that they come to the space, they come to the session, they come to the gym, whatever it is, and they feel safe to be themselves and they want to have fun. So obviously, I'd love, like I say, I love my teams to win, but it's not always like that. So I guess engagement and enjoyment is a huge part of success.
Fab, thank you very much. Keith, if I can ask you if there's anything you'd like to add. I know Georgina's given us a very broad, but really, really clear answer there. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, probably just expand on it, really. I think, from my point of view, a long time ago, really, we got involved in girls rugby, and we had 6 players, I think, at the start of that. And I think by the time we'd finished, or I'd finished the age grade, and before I progressed into the ladies, I think we had something like 150 players across the age groups, which is just tremendous. So the big thing for me is player retention. I think, again, sort of based on culture and environment, making sure that it's something that they really want to come back to every week. Yeah, that's what success looks like for me, I think. And I think, perhaps with the ladies as well. I got involved with the ladies, and I think it's three seasons ago now. And we were struggling to get numbers to training, and just maybe a slight switch in environment and making it a little bit more fun based, a little bit more easier to participate. It allowed players to sort of progress at their own pace, and therefore the retention was a bit easier. So yeah, we could all say, what does success look like? Oh, it's putting the red jersey on. It's being this. For me, it's the absolute opposite. It's the absolute opposite of that. It's really about player retention and making sure that there is that place that they really want to come back to week in, week out, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And it sounds like you've done great things in terms of growing the numbers, and that for one definitely is a signal of success. And Hannah, if I can come to you then, obviously your sport is a little bit more, well, much more individual than what Keith has just been talking about. But anything you'd like to add?
I think I'd agree with both, and especially Keith when he said about retention. So I think that's massively important to me, feeling successful in coaching women and girls, because typically, obviously, we know that sport isn't something that is pushed to young girls as much as other kind of activities. So to see them enjoy and continue playing into adulthood, I think is super important. And I think also offering freedom. So I'm very fortunate that I took up golf, but I'm not a typical golfer because I don't come from the typical background of being wealthy male, as per what golf is associated with. And I was born from a cancer estate, have a disabled sister, but for me, golf became my freedom because it enabled me to play a sport without being naturally gifted at a sport on my own, take hours kind of out, so that my mum could focus on my sister. So it was really nice to have that freedom. So I think being able to offer others that freedom, whether that's playing high level sport or whether that's just as simple as in my sport we say moving the ball forward, because that's typically what we end up doing. It doesn't matter. So giving somebody that little bit of freedom, because I got freedom from my sport, and that's why I play it today, or that's why I love it today. So yeah, I'd say success is individual, but no matter how big or small, it is that freedom and mental health kind of feeling you get from your sport. That's the most important success, in my opinion.
Great, thank you all. I mean, you've all sort of touched on enjoyment. All three of you mentioned enjoyment and sort of culture and how people can come and be themselves. So that's obviously very important to all of you. Where does performance then slot into that? Where, so I know that in teams I've been involved in, you obviously enjoy performing well, you enjoy winning, but if you're not enjoying it, it's much harder to perform. So where does the line go there?
In my sport, there's this phrase that we use. You lose more than you win, and they always say every dog has its day. So I think it's very difficult to enjoy the sport all the time. But having your own personal goals, I think that's hugely important, regardless of whether you come first in an event. I think it's slightly different because in an individual sport, you're going up against a major field, a number of people. But having your own individual goals is hugely important. Not worrying about what the next person is doing, what somebody who is much who's been doing it for longer or is easily better talented is doing. It's more so for where you can go with it. So it's important to have your own kind of success and your own goals, instead of looking at what other people are doing. I think that's if you can sometimes look too much outside, but if you've just improved each goal each time, no matter how big or small, then I think that's hugely important, especially in my sport, being an individual sport. You're going to win maybe about 10% of the time, if that. So knowing that you're improving in the certain areas that you've chosen to improve in year by year, that's more important than that overall win.
Yeah, and I guess in golf, even if you play well, the other person could play better, couldn't they? Whereas in a sport like rugby, where you're against somebody directly, you can physically stop them from playing and imposing themselves on the game. But in golf, you could hit a really good couple of shots, and the other person just hits it slightly better. So you limited control, I suppose, on what the other person does, leaving pressure aside. Obviously, thank you, Georgina. If I come back to you on that one, you've obviously experienced multiple sports there. So where do you think performance comes into enjoyment and culture?
Yeah, I think for some people, and I think it really depends on the athlete. Like, we have some people come through a pathway who are very used to performing at a certain standard, and when they join a team that perhaps isn't performing and isn't winning every game or isn't top of the league, it can really, really challenge some people. And as a coach, that could be really difficult, I find, to manage sometimes. So I think for us, we do, personal goals. We have little laminated sheets, and they write 3 personal goals before each match, and it could be literally, carrying well, or it could be a quantifiable thing. I want to win 90% of my lineouts, for example. So, it can be quantifiable things, and for them, it sort of takes the pressure off. Well, we didn't get the win, therefore the game that we played is useless, or the match was a waste of time. It becomes actually, but I did get 90% of my lineouts, and we sort of have those performance goals, and that becomes really individual. And you're able to reflect on that one-to-one with an athlete that we discuss, and then you look at all the way down to sort of looking at the under 14s that we coach, to completely different, and they can also become really frustrated. They're not getting the wins, or games are called off, or they're playing people that are bigger than them, or whatever, all these frustrations that bubble up, especially when you're coaching athletes of that age. I often find, actually, you come off the pitch, did you have a really good time? Did you have a good time in the mud with your mates? And did you feel that you actually learned something? You know, when you're making those tackles, I saw you make one really good tackle, and it's like, oh, actually, that bit of self-belief. So the performance almost comes from that as well. So as I said earlier, I'd love all my teams to win, but when we have those small wins that we take away as individuals, for us, that is just as beneficial, and it creates continuous learning that's sort of compounded on week or match on match. So I'm not saying it's easy to lose or to we've been in that space, but also it's sort of really valid and really important to take those small learnings every week.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And if I can come to you, Keith, and just sort of adapt the question slightly, because obviously I know your team was promoted last season. So has that changed the idea of performance versus enjoyment, or has it taken the pressure off? Where do you see that line?
I think it remains the same, actually. I think, for us, how do we measure performance, and does performance equal enjoyment? Well, yes and no in many respects. I think for us, we play off a very simple structure. If that structure is in place and everyone can understand our playing structure, we can then measure performance based on individuals, if that makes sense. So we expect what do we want from our 9? Well, we want our 9 to really concentrate on service of the ball. So right, that 9 is measurable, and that your service of the ball today, we talked to our 9 has been fantastic. So their performance goes up, therefore their enjoyment goes up. And again, it's not back to the wins, it's not back to anything. But if we're measuring performance based on individuals within a team, it's probably a little bit more difficult to understand that. For me, it's really about create a structure. I'm not going to give our gameplays away, don't worry. But it's we play off simple colours. Our forwards will carry off a colour, our backs will hopefully fire up through a colour, and then we've got a colour that sits in between. Everyone can identify to the colours, that's quite easy. So if we've got a new player, it's really about getting that new player in the position to where we want them to be. If they're new to the forwards, we want them to be in that forward carrying channel. Well, that means that their performance has gone up. They've understood the structure. If their performance goes up, their enjoyment goes up. It's very simple for us to measure that, and that can go right the way through then all of the players, in terms of the more seasoned player, the more experienced player, the better player, the new player, and we can just measure very simple performance tweaks to get their enjoyment more, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And if we stay with you just for a moment, all three of you have mentioned kind of environment, culture, and you're talking about building a simple game plan, obviously. So how, what approach and what steps would you take into building a culture? Where would you start?
I think it starts with silliness, actually. And that may be a bit strange to some people, but if you can come in and start a warm up that is just daft, they can all relate to it, and then the barriers are broken down. They're then in it, and then we'll go into, say, a simple handling drill, and maybe we would expect more from a more seasoned player than we would from a new player, and we can just adapt something really simple. So the culture is learning. Let's learn the game. Let's see what we can improve, and therefore the culture sort of grows itself. We're very lucky within the ladies that we've got some fantastic senior players that are willing to give back. I don't know why we all get into coaching. I know what my philosophy is, which is I like to give back something that was once given to me. That's essentially my philosophy, and there's no more to it than that. So I was lucky enough to be in great cultures in previous clubs and when I was playing. And all I want to do is mimic that. Just make it really welcoming. Concentrate on the performance, like we've answered in the earlier questions, and just create that space where people can just come, relax, get something out of it, and just carry on, and really want to look forward to next week or look forward to the game, where they can just apply that little bit of learning that they've got, not just from coaches, I'd like to add, but from more. They'll probably learn more from the players that they're playing alongside than me blowing a whistle or screaming and shouting and pointing our fingers. It's that player that puts their arm around them and says, no, run this way, or just hold there, stay next to me. That's the culture that we want to create, is that everyone's looking out for each other.
Great, thank you. And I can see everybody nodding along in agreement. So you're obviously saying something that I think resonates with everybody who's kind of coached and worked in that environment. So Hannah, if I come back to you, thinking of sort of motivation and inspiration, because obviously you probably work a bit more often on a one-to-one basis than the other two. Have you found any particular methods that really work, any methods that don't work when you're trying to motivate sort of an individual?
I think it's being quite adaptable to the individual you get in front of you. Everyone's so unique and likes to learn in completely different ways. So being able to adapt my learning kind of philosophies to each student is incredibly important. But also to learn from them and ask what they want, because it's usually important to take into consideration, why has my pupil come to see me? Being somebody who has played at a higher level and has had coaching, it sounds bad, but I took some of the negatives that I had in my coaching experiences and tried to make sure that I didn't perform them in my coaching when I'm doing my own coaching, sorry. So it's kind of making sure that I can give each player their own experience, their own goals. And some players love having banter, having a laugh, some are a little bit more serious. And I do typically see a lot, especially with females, needing more encouragement. Maybe hasn't got that encouragement or that confidence off the bat, so needs to be almost nurtured a little bit more and given that, oh, you can do this. This is excellent. You know, even if something in the technique wasn't perfect, look at all the other good things that you did leading up. So I think it's super important to be very encouraging and offer somebody what they want from a session. It's not my session, it's theirs. So I think it's super important to build that relationship. I think all of us can agree that we're not just coaches or good at our field. We're kind of like therapists as well. So you do kind of get to know a person very well. And I think that's super important. You want to build that relationship so they know they're in good hands, they can trust you, and they know that they're going to progress long term. So I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Georgina, if I come to you and ask you the same question around motivation and inspiration. So obviously you work with a team, but then obviously there's individuals within the team you've got to spend time with as well.
I'd say, like, kind of building on what Hannah said, I think it's so relatable what you said, and even in team sport just really resonate with a lot of that. And I've found mostly, you know, most of my coaching career, coaching women and girls, I found that female athletes tend to ask why a lot more, and that why becomes motivation. And like often if I'm coaching, especially sort of younger boys, if I say, you know, we're going to go home and do this drill, it's like, sure, yeah, let's do the drill, you know, bash get it out sort of thing. Whereas a lot of female athletes need to know why. I don't understand why I'm moving the pad this way. I don't understand why I'm running this line or whatever. And like, I think that almost becomes a motivation. So if I'm saying, when we're doing this drill, we're breaking this little bit down, and the benefit of this in our bigger game, in our wider game, in our kicking game, or whatever it is X, Y, and Z. And they're like, yeah, sure, no, I've bought in. So a lot of that motivation for me comes from just that added explanation. And I think, in all honesty, an honest reflection, you know, we have the benefit of having all our games filmed. So we will sit down and do analysis, and we sit down, and I guess it's, you know, it's different. So I guess a golf swing where it's that one moment. We look at this whole 80 minutes, and we break things down, and we go, actually, yeah, that was actually really, really rubbish what we did just then. And sometimes that's a motivation of not you were rubbish or you could have done better, but as a team we just didn't perform in that moment. And we always use those bits as constructive feedback, and we always say you just happen to be the person in the frame or the person in the ruck at that point. It's just a general problem that we're discussing. So we always find those bits, or we break it down and say, look, this is actually what's working. When you review the game, where you compare your first game of the season to your 10th game of the season, that for players is a lot of motivation. And again, it's that why, as to, we'd be drilling this part of the game, and look how much it's improved in 10 games. So it's those sort of, I find, kind of practical things that have been quite useful in terms of, yeah, inspiring and motivating and keeping people engaged, instead of just got to go to training again on a Monday, and again it's raining, and got to go another game and it feels a bit of a slog. So making sure they see the impact has been huge for us.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And again, all really resonates. And I know I was nodding, and I can see other people nodding. Keith, is there anything you'd like to expand on there, or add to that? I know you've already given some answers about culture and enjoyment and fun, so I'll over to you.
Yeah, I just think Georgina just touched on it there actually, and I was asked the same question or a similar question some years back. What's the difference between coaching boys and girls? Well, girls really want to focus on detail. They want to understand the mechanics of it, whereas boys are totally different. They just want to go headstrong into it, and I find that much more rewarding that we can use the mechanics of it. So from a coaching point of view, when a player comes up to you and says, why am I passing this way? Can I not do it this? And you explain the mechanics, that gives you a real good ability to coach better because of the question. And it's interesting to hear that then, Georgina, that you probably see it quite similar actually. And that's probably a fundamental difference actually in the difference between coaching boys and girls, or men and women. Women definitely focus on the detail much more.
Brilliant. And that is a really nice segue into the next question, which is about sort of the pitfalls that we face as coaches. So particularly yourself, Keith, you just mentioned the difference between coaching, male and female athletes. Are there any things that you've kind of learned along the way where you've tried something and it hasn't worked, or a common mistake that you think people make?
If I'm going to be brutally honest here, it through the month, it really changes in the way that you coach. And linking back to sort of menstrual cycles, and I know that may be quite foreign for most men to understand that, and I don't mean that in any disrespect at all, because it's not just women that are learning here. Men are learning how to coach women, and I think that's really important. And I think your coaching philosophy has to change through the month. You can't keep hammering the same thing, because the emotions changing through the month as well. So trying to drag yourself along with that I think it's more of a challenge for the coach than it is the player. So the pitfalls, the things that I've definitely learned over the years, when you're saying just keep doing this, well, one, boredom sets in. Two, if they're not getting much out of it, they're not going to enjoy it. And if they can't do it, well, they feel like they're failing. So we've tried, me personally, I do try to change it through either through the month or through the quarter or whatever it may look like, just to I've got a fundamental handling drill that I'm sure drives players mental. And we talk about the same thing every week. We're going to run out in threes, and we're going to pass the ball, and we're going to put speed through the middle. But really what we're trying to do is just trying to get the mechanics of the pass better. And some just are not into it that week, some are not into it the following week. Someone's better than someone else the following week, but it's such a simple drill that hopefully everyone gets something out of it. So pitfalls for me, one, being male, I think is a pitfall in a woman's sport. But I'm really grateful to have had the time to learn, and now I feel probably 10 years down the line, I can give so much more, and that just comes from learning, really. So I just think pitfalls, don't keep doing the same thing, make it fun, keep it interesting, and just be a bit more sympathetic, I think.
Excellent, thank you. I'll come to you, Hannah, now, if you've got anything to add to that, anything you've sort of found doesn't work or anything you've learned the hard way.
I think it's really important to make sure, like you said, the sessions are fun. Golf is a very technical sport, so I can only really talk about golf. So it can sometimes be very difficult to get all the movement, but making it a game-like scenario and then explaining why that game works for learning the technical movement, I think it's worked really well, making it incredibly fun. And I think some people forget that when you're teaching adults, that they also enjoy having a game, having a laugh, having a good time. And typically in my sport, I'd say coaches tend to make it very serious, and that just doesn't encourage people to come back or play. And the same thing, they want to be silly. Even adults want to be silly. So giving them a game that they can play and go against each other, and I do try and make it in kind of like a group session in a team format, is really important, because we're building a community and we need that camaraderie around kind of encouraging the players, encouraging each other, because there's only so much as a coach you can do. There has to be a community that those players can kind of go into and be part of themselves, because you'll only coach them on certain days of the week. They'll be then practicing or playing or doing those drills themselves, and if they have a community that they can love, enjoy, and have fun with, they're going to continue playing and going to play more. And the more you play, they do say practice makes perfect, the better you get. So I think making it so it's a really nice community, making it fun. I think we've used that a lot, but it is completely true. Taking too much of the serious play, taking that kind of out of it, and knowing that players do get discouraged, especially when it's a very, very technical sporting change they have to make. So putting in a way that links back to your fundamental movement skills is really important, because they'll learn that much quicker. Linking it to an analogy that makes sense. We have lots of things about the grip in golf, and the grip's one of the most important things in golf because your hand's the only thing that touches the club. But linking it to things people do on a day-to-day basis in terms of grip pressure, such as drinking a cup of tea, drinking a glass of gin, using a hammer, even just squeezing some toothpaste out of your tube of toothpaste. I think it's super important to make it relatable, because let's be honest, the technical side of things, the words that are associated with a lot of sports, most people don't know. They don't understand, and they don't need to. We just need to find a way to get the information across to the player in a way that's understandable, instead of it being too complicated and too hard. Let's make it easy. So I think it's really important to kind of bring everything back down to the basics, because they're really important, and again, make it really enjoyable too.
That's great, thank you. Georgina, I'll come to you with the same question, and feel free to add in. We talked about pitfalls. Feel free to add in any kind of easy wins that you found along the road as well.
Yeah, sure. I think someone just touched on it in terms of a pitfall is like when you come in sometimes quite heavy-handed, and like sometimes we have sessions, especially start of the season when people are really keen. You have sessions, and sometimes there's been occasions where there's 2 coaches and 70 players, and it's like, gosh, and you come in and there's a bit of a heavy-handed, right, this is what's acceptable, this is what isn't acceptable, and you're all going to confine to a culture that we think works, or that we think, or the session structure that we think is going to work. And your session structure develops with the number of players you've got, and the type of players you've got, how players are feeling, menstrual cycle, all those sorts of things. It's that being adaptable to working at a culture, and that develops over a season. It looks different this season, last season, next season. It always looks different. So I guess it's a pitfall and an easy win. I think like access as well. So we talk a lot about women and girls sort of coaching and what the differences are. And there's a sort of the emotional things, also the practical things, thinking about, I don't know, your distance to the toilet, someone needs it, or things like, accessible period products, knowledge. So like the knowledge, we have a lot of players come at 18, a lot of them have never done any sport whatsoever in school, let alone, girls rugby. And, we offer as many resources and workshops as we can to just learn the basics. And if you already know it, great. If you don't, no problem, come along. There's no, we try and improve sort of baseline knowledge. So for us, that's easy wins, because we're saying, it's open, here's the access to physical stuff, but also sort of practical and emotional things. And I guess the last easy win that I was thinking about before this webinar was just to keep everyone involved. My pet hate as a player is when you sit there and someone explains a drill for 5 minutes, then you might get 1 or 2 reps as a player, and you think, oh, I'm not actually sure I got anything out of that. So if you can set up 3 sections, you've got 70 athletes, you've got 3-4 iterations of the drill, trying to keep an eye on everyone. If someone's injured, we don't get them just sat there watching. We'll get them holding a pad or passing the ball in, or we'll get them on timer, or we'll get them to be we call them group leaders, and they get to do the shouting and things, or they get to be the whistleblower. We just try and keep everyone involved. I think that's a really easy win, where you're not having people sat, on the floor in the dugout, or they're feeling a bit, gosh, I've only got 1 rep out of that. So it's just real engagement and making sure that everyone has access to training in the way that they need it, and they want it. As Keane said, it could be different week to week. Could have had an awful week, and just access to the kind of training that you need on that day, because Like, I think it's easy to forget that some players come to training, although they might love being a rugby player, they might have aspirations. Some players come to training having had the most awful day or week of their lives. They might have had a really awful something's going on at home, and this might be a real place of safety for them and a real opportunity to just switch off. And if we're going, right, this is what isn't acceptable, and you've just got to stand there and unit one rep, and I just feel like it just sucks all the fun and enjoyment out of things. And Hannah's right, like, it's so nice to create a fun and enjoyable. I enjoy coaching a lot more, and everyone's having a laugh. And I think the players enjoy it a lot more. So I've kind of touched on a lot of things there, but yeah, enjoyment and access would be key for us.
Fab, thank you so much. And then I think we'll finish with a sort of contentious topic to finish with. It's been such a harmonious call with you all agreeing with each other. So we'll see if we can upset the apple cart with a contentious issue to finish off. So obviously this week is all of our activities are about International Women's Week, celebrating championing women in sport, and we're all obviously aware that there's quite a lot of inequality when we talk about what's available, the provision for women versus men, and obviously there are fundamental differences as well. So is equality in sport possible, and how do we achieve it, and what would that look like? And I'll try and get you to keep your answer sort of as short as you can for this one, because this one could probably rage on long into the night. But I'll start with you, Georgina.
Again, it might be contentious, but I sometimes think that it's okay that we're two different sports. So, for example, in men and women's rugby, everyone's really keen to say, well, that doesn't happen in the men's game, this doesn't happen in the women's game. And I actually think the fact that we're two really different sports is amazing. I think we are two different sports for a reason. People enjoy watching one or the other or both for different reasons, and I think there's that aspect to it. And I compare it to when I was coaching rowing, and that is very much the same sport. You do the same what's it called, rhythm and the same behavior 1,000 times in a race. And there I think that is really challenging things, and sometimes I think it's getting a piece of paper and going, where is the equity here? And it isn't just, well, there's 4 toilets for the men and 4 toilets for the women at the race course, when you need more toilets for women or things like that. So it's sort of tagging up the rule book of, just because everyone's on the same toilets or the same, I don't know, size blade in rowing, or save size ball, like what actually is what we need, and what it is tagging up a rule book, and sometimes that does it rocks the boat. But I think that's really necessary. So I think there is possibility, but I think it's important to remember that there are differences in between the sport, and men and women play the same sports differently, but also they play same sports, in similar ways. So I think it's just being really honest in terms of what the differences and similarities are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer and a great point. I think when you look at the Olympics, for example, for years and years and years, it has been accepted that the hurdle height for women is different. The weight, the javelin, the weight it's different because they are different, but they're not considered any less an athlete because they compete in the women's version. And yet when sometimes there's a suggestion of making a rugby ball slightly smaller for women's hands, or a basketball slightly smaller, there's uproar about from certain quarters of society about, well, you can't do that, it's not the same. So I take your point there perfectly. I'll come to you, Keith, next, if I may.
I suppose it's probably quite close to my heart, really, in many respects, equality in the rugby club, if you like. What is equality, I suppose, is the first question. I personally think it comes back to facilities. And I actually think that the old dinosaurs in most rugby clubs are just scared of it. They don't know how to act. They don't know how to behave. They don't know what women need, and they don't know how to manage it. Therefore, that stifles equality. Really, we're looking for a place to change, hot water, somewhere where we can train under lights, because it's a winter sport and it can be a bit of a challenge with no lights. So equality really is about facilities. If we can get the facilities right, therefore the women have their own door, so they're not walking past the men's changing rooms. We've got a changing room that's functional for women with a toilet that may have sanitary products in it and the likes. And then we've got facilities that are suitable for our sort of training, whether there needs to be more 3G pitches, whether there needs to be investment in that. That's what would solve equality, if you like, or the judgments around equality. It comes back to facilities and putting the right things in place. So there is no need to be scared of, a player walking past the men's changing rooms and they're in the showers naked and someone takes offence to it and then it gets blown out of proportion for what it really was, or vice versa. Really, facilities having the opportunity to have a place to play would probably sort that out in my humble opinion. That is really.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about there with facilities is also it removes barriers, doesn't it? Unnecessary barriers. By having those equal facilities, that's potentially a barrier that might stop somebody joining a rugby club, might stop them joining a team, stop them coming to training that night, for example. So yeah, I hear you 100% there. And I'll come to you, Hannah, if I may now.
So for me, like it's always pushing equity of opportunities rather than sort of equality, because it's not just, we're not talking just gender, in my opinion. We're talking socioeconomically, culturally, disability-wise. All of these factors come into the lack of participation in certain areas for sport. So I think it's important to through the whole areas be looking at how we can improve and change. Saying that, even if we as a collective group are hitting one or two people from those particular areas, I think we are doing our job. To just change somebody's life or make their life easier, we're doing our job. It's not easy to change a sport, or to change sport as being male dominated into having more females involved, and technically I think it will always still be slightly heavier on the male side. But as individuals, if we're making a difference, as a whole, it doesn't matter what's going on, because as an individual, you're making a difference to somebody's life area. So it would be nice to say that we'll eventually get to equity of opportunities. But look, we've been striving for this for multiple years in multiple industries. So if we could just do our own individual bits, I think that's incredibly important. It's getting the right equipment. I think we touched upon it earlier, the guys on the call, that women need different equipment in multiple sports. We as well need to have different, in my sport, different size courses, different amount of times that play certain sports as well, just because of bodies and whatnot. So I do think that it's important to just remember that it's probably not going to be something that we'll see change in our lifetime. But if we can move the needle just a little bit every single time, we're doing our job. There's a phrase in golf, so golf originates apparently from the acronym "gentlemen only, ladies forbidden." But I do enjoy that, because anytime I sit in a room, I always think, well, we're changing history little by little. So that's a massive positive.
Yeah, you're breaking big barriers, sort of every time you do something, aren't you, with golf? Because obviously it's a very different environment. Well, listen, thank you all so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate everything you've contributed to the call. I've been absolutely fascinated with your insight, all three of you. I'm going to bring you all back now so we can see everybody. There we go. So yeah, thank you so much, guys, for your time and your answers. I'm sure the people of Carmarthenshire and Swansea, Neath, Talbot, and Pembrokeshire, when they watch this, are going to get a lot. And there's a lot of young women and girls who are going to benefit from your experience when it's shared with other coaches. So diolch yn fawr I chi, and thank you very much, everybody.